Tonight on Top Story, Director of Transport and Logistics at the Jubilee House accuses Martin Amidu of deliberately frustrating and setting confusion within the system to pursue what he describes as a political agenda.
Every week, to fill in the food tax, total life with the food tax.
We have details as he narrates the chronology of events on how Mr. Amidu's paranoia got the better part of him in every dealings, leading to his rejection of vehicles and office buildings plus accommodation. Also tonight, President Akufo-Addo questions Martin Amidu's decision not to prosecute former President Mahama, saying it had no moral or legal grounding. More from the President's 40-point response to the former special prosecutor as government vehemently rejects allegations of interference.
Nobody requested of him to do it. Nobody stopped him. When he voluntarily provided a copy, his initial comments to the president and asked for comment, he brought it on his own.
That and more here on Top Story tonight, brought to you by Belacqua Mineral Water and also Gassam, the nation builder. Thanks for staying with us here on Top Story. Tonight, the Director of Logistics at the Jubilee House, Nana Opong, has descended heavily on the former Special Prosecutor Martin Amidu, accusing him of deliberately frustrating and setting confusion within the system to pursue what he describes as his own parochial interest and political agenda. Martin Amidu, in his resignation letter to the president, stated that he does not feel that the president has done enough to safeguard the independence of his office, citing interference and attempts of turning him into a poodle. The president has since rejected the claims and responded appropriately to all of Mr. Martin Amidu's assertions, accusing him in some cases of dereliction of duty. We're yet to actually see more on the issues of attempt in turning him into a poodle. We'll get details of that. But first, let's unpack some of the claims and responses in the following News Desk report.
On the first matter of failure to resource his office, Martin Amidu in his resignation letter said,
"The compulsion to use a limited number of staff in a 3-bedroom and boys' quarters accommodation undermined the achievement of the objects of the office and my undertaking an oath before Parliament. One cannot seriously continue to prevent and fight corruption by depending on a seconded staff of a 2-year duration who are looking forward to and or over their shoulders to returning to their main employers, who consequently may have more influence over them than the special prosecutor under whom they are supposed to work."
To this claim by Martin Amidu, the government roundly and flatly denies and insists they had adequately resourced Martin Amidu to undertake the duties of his office. In the response of the presidency, signed by Executive Secretary to the President, Nana Asante-Bediatuo, it is claimed,
"In 2018, an amount of 1 million Ghana cedis was released to your office to enable it undertake setup activities. In June 2019, your office requested and was granted commencement authorization to incur capital expenditure of 2.79 million cedis. You failed to make a request for payment in respect of this related procurement."
The response goes on to state that, quotes,
"The compensation budget for the Office of Special Prosecutor in 2019 was not utilized because your office was not able to recruit relevant staff by the end of the year. In 2019, financial clearance was given to your office to recruit 249 staff. As at the end of the year, the staff had not been recruited. The failure of your office to recruit personnel cannot be laid at the doorstep of government."
The government further claims it identified a building opposite the Bank of Ghana Hospital in Cantonments. However, the special prosecutor placed a call to the Chief of Staff to indicate his preference for another building belonging to the erstwhile Ghana National Trading Corporation close to the British High Commission. The government accepted the request, and whilst renovation was still ongoing, Martin Amidu halted works and requested for a 10-story building at Ridge belonging to the GET Fund. The letter adds that after renovation, Martin Amidu refused to move in because the keys to the building were disrespectfully sent to him in an envelope. On the other matter relating interference in the duties of the special prosecutor, Martin Amidu wrote,
"The one condition upon which I accepted to be nominated as the special prosecutor was your firm response to me that you will respect and ensure same by your government for my independence and freedom of action as the special prosecutor. You, President Akufo-Addo, had labored under the mistaken belief that I could hold the office of the special prosecutor as your poodle."
Among other things, Martin Amidu alleged that the president had invited him to his office to impress on him to shelve his corruption risk assessment report, which had, among other things, made findings of bid rigging and conflict of interest against the finance minister, and also a negative anti-corruption assessment against the presidency in the manner it gave executive approval for the deal. The presidency responds by saying,
"At the outset, it must be made clear that throughout your tenure as special prosecutor, neither the president nor any member of his government has interfered or sought to interfere with your work. Your accusation of interference with your function simply on account of the meeting the president held with you is perplexing. In exercise of what you considered to be your powers under Act 959, you had voluntarily proceeded to produce the Ejapa report.
It is left to be seen if, as characteristic of citizen vigilante Martin Amidu, he will respond to the specific issues raised in the response from the presidency to his resignation letter.
So we'll hear more from President Akufo-Addo's response, including questions about Mr. Martin Amidu's failure to prosecute Mr. Mahama, even though he claims he found ample evidence against him. So the decision has been described as lacking moral or legal grounding. But tonight, let's first listen to the Director of Logistics at the Jubilee House, Nana Opong. He's been speaking in an interview on OKFM.
This someone no said Matiami do no accounts in this car or the way to Macra, no more demand. I am in one papa because them one another bank for point T a Matiami so may demand.
I was really surprised that Martinamidu raised issues of logistical constraints. I remember sending a Toyota Land Cruiser to his office under the instruction of the Chief of Staff. He in fact returned it with a claim that he suspected a vehicle had been bugged. After that episode, he kept returning with one story or the other. About why he could not continue using the car, even after changing it. From a flat tire to worn-out brake bands, Amidu never seemed pleased by our efforts to make him comfortable in his work. So it cannot be true that he wasn't given the resources to work. Every week, he came for his fuel coupons and the evidence is there.
And nobody will say the whole cassette. Or young cook president, you must say, your man logistics. Your money be a year to my number, tell me to your troop. Every week, be a Matiami to fill in the food tank, total like with a food tank. A small car, pick up food tank, every week be a filling food tank, Matiami. When you open gravity, poor book at the money fuel, but much quick if you're waiting for it, and going to buy a chief of staff, and this is more party.
Even on the accommodation issue, the Chief of Staff provided a building for him and he rejected it with a claim that there were too many rooms. He later chose an old house and offered to wait while it was renovated.
They will be born the pastor or Mlamay Bibiana because deal with the way the after that, when you won't come from.
So that's Nana Opong. He's the Director of Logistics and Transport at the Jubilee House. Now, the Honorary Vice President of Imani Africa, he's been speaking in support of Martin Amidu on his claim that government failed to adequately resource his office. According to Bright Simmons, in spite of all the budgetary allocations, government's failure to migrate the office onto the gift mix meant that it would have been difficult for the special prosecutor to access those funds.
The problem that you have is that several preconditions must be met before the money that has been voted can actually be used for work. One of the problems that the special prosecutor had was that they were not setting him up on giftness, right? Mm-hmm. The controller and accountant General Department is the only organization that can migrate you on to GIFMIS. And in GIFMIS, you have the financial spending model. You also have the Human Resource Management Information System model, the HRMIS model, which more or less is the evolution of the IPPD2. Now, the problem is that none of those things are within the power of the special prosecutor. He doesn't control these computing systems. His own office needs access to computing capabilities and the likes to access GIFMIS. And then they have to create the necessary accounts and the rest of it so that he's operational. If he's not willing to break the law, because in 2016 we passed a law that said payment outside GIFMIS is illegal. And if he's special prosecutor and he cannot break the law.
Well, that's Bright Simon. He's the honorary vice president of Imani Africa. Now, we can listen to Mr. Kojo Nkrumah, the information minister, disagreeing with him on the Super Morning Show.
We respect Mr. Martin Amidu, and we respectfully disagree with these two arguments that he has put in the public domain. And for the purposes of the public record, it is important to state the facts as they are, and the public can make their judgment. The responsibility is for government to provide the logistics, and for the governing board and the administrators to do their part of the bargain. And as is done everywhere, they will request for building vehicles, you make it available. They will request for budget, you make it available. They are responsible for recruiting their staff that they work with, more especially the Office of the Special Prosecutor, the independent Special Prosecutor. I am not sure that any analyst can even convince Mr. Amidu that we as a government are responsible for recruiting staff for him. The responsibility for recruiting people, including all the types of sophisticated investigators, etc., that Mr. Amidu requires for his work, lies respectfully, squarely, at the doorstep of the board and the administrators of the office. And that is why they were given financial clearance to recruit 249 persons, within which clearance they were able or they have room to do all of these recruitment. It is our understanding that they recruited 2 persons out of that 249. So I think we have to be very clear on that one. Then secondly, on this matter of operational difficulties, I think the response from the office of the president is quite detailed. We don't seek to blame him. We will not disrespect Mr. Amidu. We will not insult or call him names. But the facts and the correspondence between the Office of the Chief of Staff and Mr. Amidu, we believe must be put out so that the general public can make up its mind whether or not indeed any fetters were put in his way. To the first subject of interference, when Mr. Amidu elected to do a corruption risk assessment, and we suspect that it was because he was interpreting the part of the law that says prevent. He was interpreting it in a particular way. Nobody stopped him. Nobody requested of him to do it. Nobody stopped him. When he voluntarily provided a copy or his initial comments to the president and asked for comments and said that they were supposed to inform future executive action, nobody had asked him to bring it. He brought it on his own. And the president inquired of him at that first meeting, have you given the persons concerned with this report an opportunity to be heard? And Mr. Amidu said he had not done that. He had requested documents. And the president was quite clear from that meeting that, well, then in my comments to you, which you have requested, I will ask them to be heard, and I will share with you what their responses are. It's basic in law, it's basic in auditing.
Information Minister Kojo Nkrumah on the Super Morning Show earlier today. This is top story. Let's bring in the Occupy Ghana. They had also issued a statement together with a number of CSOs who had raised concerns about Mr. Martin Amidu's resignation and what it means for the fight against corruption in this country. Mr. Kweku Sagbefia is the leader of Occupy Ghana. Thank you very much for your time here on Newsnight. So now you're reading the president's response to Mr. Martin Amidu. Earlier, you had raised issues about disquiet after reading the letter from Mr. Martin Amidu. Now that you've heard the president's response and rejection of claims of interference amidst attempts to turn Mr. Martin Amidu into a poodle, I would want to hear your thoughts, learnings, or even verdicts, if there is any, on this particular issue.
Well, we're disappointed, very much so, because whilst we have refused to get into the merits of Mr. Amidu's points and those of the president, we're a bit disappointed that if Mr. Amidu really thought that the executive was encroaching on his independence, what he could have done as a patriot and what would have helped all of us going forward was for him to have stood his ground. There are others and other institutions in this country who have stood their grounds, especially like in the Office of the Auditor General, stood their grounds, gone to court to assess their independence, and the courts have granted stay. And so why run with your tail in between your legs when some other, independent bodies who have also, felt this encroached have sooner walked over the executive than resigned? So here we believe we have lost a unique opportunity to have asserted the independence of the Office of Special Prosecutor. This would have set up a very good precedent for all other office holders going forward. And now we've lost that, and we are even more disappointed that the Office of the President responded and accepted the resignation of Mr. Martin Amidu. We feel that he's literally been let off the hook, because if the presidency had refused to accept it, he would have been forced to come and really spell out the issues that he seems to be voicing out, that they are encroaching upon his independence. I would have gotten to the bottom of the matter and then decided what to do whenever institutions that have some constitutional immunity from interference from the executive, come under fire like he claims that he did.
Well, you raise issues about Mr. Martin Amidu not staying long enough to continue the fight and running with his tail in between his legs and all. You cite Mr. Daniel Domelevo, for instance. He took up a number of cases, including that of the senior minister. We saw how it ended, didn't we? He's now on leave. Are you saying that he's still at post fighting corruption?
No, but I'm saying that, you see, the assertion of independence of a constitutionally independent body and their success in that regard usually does not depend on one office holder. There's usually a precedent that hammers and enforces and keeps fighting until that independence is asserted. We've had the same issue with the Electoral Commission. We've had all these people and the office holders asserting that independence. It's losing that hurts us. It's the fact that we had this unique opportunity to do so that hurts us. And make no mistake, yes, Mr. Domelevo may have been thrown out of his office temporarily by the executive. That is true. But if anybody assumes that ends the fight on the independence of constitutionally independent bodies, that person, including the executive, may be living in a certain world different from what the reality will be. And the reality indeed is that once that critical mass of assertion, of independent assertion builds up, it's a matter of time before the courts enforce that assertion. And there's countless cases that support this claim. Now, this is the first time we have set up an office of special prosecutor. And so it was important for him also to fight his own fight, assert his own independence, and have the executive back off. That's how you do it.
And how are you hoping, Mr. Segbefia, that a single man, Mr. Martin Amidu, of course, we know that he writes very powerful in the things that he writes. He's talked about emoluments not being paid for the period that he was, appointed. After 2 years, that's when he gets an appointment letter. He didn't have accommodation, office space, and all. He didn't have the power to procure. He wasn't on a gift mix. You've heard that. And then also he didn't have the resources. Even people that were giving to him, investigators on secondment, he thought that they were compromised. He was unable to deliver. He feels that office was set up for him to fail from the very onset. How did you reckon that he would stay on as a single man to fight this whole battle by himself?
Well, so you see, at the time that he, submitted his letter of resignation, we only had his side of the story. You understand? And based on that, and this is why we, at this point, we haven't even gone into the substantive cases or issues that either party raises. But we have been focusing on the fact that even if what he was saying is the truth, leaving was not a good idea. because he needed to stay in. And after all, yes, he writes a lot, he talks a lot. Now the government has responded and giving us so much information. It's really hard to believe, to know who to believe. But ultimately, you were appointed as special prosecutor.
But you sound like you're very convinced with the government's, response to the claims that Mr. Martin Amidu put out.
Well, if Mr. Martin Amidu thought he could make these allegations in a 3-page letter and not have the executive respond, then clearly he didn't understand how governments work.
Are you convinced?
The government indeed had provided enough evidence for us all to pause in who we would have taken sides with, even if we were inclined to take his side. Clearly, when you put it all together and you put them side by side, you do get the sense that there's a lot going on beyond what Mr. Amidu wrote and obviously beyond what the government wrote. How would we have gotten to the bottom of it? We would have gotten to the bottom of it if he had stayed. This actually drums home the fact and the tenet of our disappointment. The fact that now that you have resigned and now that the executive says that they have accepted your resignation, how will change come to the office of the special prosecutor if the points he raised are indeed true and accurate? Now that you are out of it, is it therefore an expectation that the next OSP then picks up the fight and has to start all over again if he, Martin Amidu, in spite of all the resources at his disposal, his exciting verbiage in the media and all the write-up that he puts out there, in spite of all his strength and his powers and his touted independence, if he couldn't stay to really build the office of the special prosecutor to that point where its independence is irrevocably asserted, who else will? And that's why you need to understand why we are disappointed, because this was an opportunity that would have set the tone for all office of special prosecutor holders going forward. An opportunity we have lost and lost disappointing.
Well, so for you, he quit too quickly. He should have stayed on to fight. But do you think also that the man Martin Amidu and his appointment to the office of the special prosecutor, considering the work that he had done over the period, do you think that we expected too much from him?
Well, my personal opinion on the office of the special prosecutor, and please indulge me here. So this is a person who clearly had a certain personal and professional vendetta against the people of the previous government. And so in his write-ups and everything else that he did, he looked like the one to go after corruption. And so the government at that time then thought that no one was better suited to fill that position. But you see, a man that has a certain personal or professional vendetta against a government that really did vilify and really mess him up now assumes the role of an office that is bigger than his personal vendetta. And if you go into this office with a certain ego where, you feel that you are, because you see, he works from a sense of righteousness, a sense of knowing that he is right. And when you are working with that sense, and as a lot of lawyers will tell you, whatever sense of righteousness or sense of right and wrong you have only goes to the law. And so it required a certain downplaying of ego and coming forward of what the facts are, so that if you file a case in court and that case is thrown out because the case was wrongfully filed, what do? You refile. But if you come back and you sit at home as if you didn't expect that there will be some legal challenge to what you thought you were doing to bring corrupt persons to book, then it means then that what you're serving in that office is your ego and not the constitutional requirements, that the constitutional powers that is required of you. And this is even, further underscores our disappointment. This is an opportunity we have lost, and we may never gain it back. Because it's important for us to understand it. If you are in a constitutionally, created body, you are not only there for yourself, you are also there for the rest of us who want to believe that the fight against corruption can be won. So if you go there and you make it so much about you, so much so that we do not get what we want, so that in a way that is objective and you can present, and this is of course a lot of the reasons why people have fights with Occupy Ghana, because a lot of people believe that whenever issues come, we should come out and say or speak something about it. And once we try to do that, ultimately whatever we want to say, we want to be able to hold that up in court. And of course, what you say in the public domain and what you prove in court may never be the same. That high standard is what we expect of everybody that's an office, a member of the office holder of the Office of Special Prosecutor. And so that's why it was important for him to have stood his ground, even if he believed that his independence was being interfered by the executive. This would have been an amazing opportunity, and he's blown it up.
Well, we're grateful for your time, Mr. Kweku Segbefia. He has been speaking for Occupy Ghana. Now, there's been a number of articles and commentary on this back and forth between the former special prosecutor, Martin Amidu, and, of course, the president. There's a statement also on Facebook that we cited, that of the Director of Communications for the presidency, Mr. Eugene Ahin, and portions of it say that the statement, okay, let me quote the whole statement or write-up that he's put on Facebook. He says, the statement put out by the Secretary to the President, Nana Bidietu Asante, which was addressed to the former Special Prosecutor, Mr. Martin Amidu, will be the only statement, and only is in capitals. It says it will be the only statement from the Presidency on this matter. The President is focused on delivering on his mandate and securing 4 more to do more on 7th December, on end quote. So whilst we wait to see if Mr. Martin Amidu, a man noted for venting through the writing of epistles, will respond to this. We've already seen this from the Director of Communications at the Presidency, but we wait to see if Mr. Martin Amidu will be giving a response to the response given him by the President. But let's see what others are writing on this. I've seen some from Professor Jampo and then also Kwekwaza. Walk us through it, Manuel.
So let's start off from Professor Kwekwasari, who's also referred to as Kwekwaza. He makes a direct point that it's actually a bad idea for the president to be inviting an independent constitutional officer to discuss a report prepared by the latter on activities related to the former or his appointees. Beyond that, he goes ahead to talk about issues of corporate governance and others, talking about how budgetary allocations which were underutilized in previous years were rolled over for the office of the special prosecutor, and says that the budgetary system of the country is a total mess, and I cannot make sense of the numbers. For instance, focusing only on paragraph 17 and 18, that is of the reply from the office of the president, I learned that 65.7 million Ghana cedis was transferred to the special prosecutor's bank account in 2019. However, he only utilized 5.2 million Ghana cedis, leaving a balance of 60.4 million. Contrary to policy, the 60.4 million Ghana cedis was not returned to the consolidated fund, but rolled to the SP's account for the following year. And he ends that particular line by saying bad with huge exclamation marks behind it, giving a signal that that was not supposed to be done. And in fact, the executive secretary to the president admitted that in his reply to Mr. Martin Amidu, that it was out of the benevolence of the presidency that the monies were rolled over to the next year to his office. Professor Ransford Jampo has also been writing, and he makes a point that he did not expect Martin Amidu to have resigned. He goes ahead to say that these issues of attempted interference and so on allegedly are to be expected in the course of the work of such independent offices like the Office of the Special Prosecutor. And so he expected that he would have asserted his independence as enshrined in the act that establishes his office to have continued to work rather than resigning.
Thank you very much, Manuel Cranting there. And that's it for Top Story. Newsnight starts in a bit. Top Story is brought to you by Bill Aqua Mineral Water as well as Gassim, the nation builder. I am Emefa Apawu. I'll be back shortly with Newsnight.